It was broad daylight, the kind of afternoon where the sun sat high and merciless, pouring light on every corner of the city. But even in the open glare of day, cruelty does not hide. It simply dares to show itself more boldly. For Amari Bennett, a janitor who had spent years quietly working in the towering glass building of Harrington Global Enterprises, daylight was supposed to mean safety. The bustling sidewalks, the constant stream of professionals rushing to meetings, and the blinding brightness should have made the world feel less threatening. But on that particular day, under that wide blue sky, he discovered that injustice doesn't wait for shadows. It happens right in front of everyone, in plain sight, and it demands to be remembered. What happened to Amari in broad daylight was not just humiliation. It was a public attempt to strip away his humanity, to make him less than who he was. But what no one expected, especially the ones holding the power, was that this very act would ignite a downfall so devastating that it would bring an empire worth billions crashing down. And the question remains, how far will someone's cruelty go before it destroys them too? Watch closely, because this is not just Amari's story. It is a story that speaks to all of us. Don't forget to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe if you believe stories like this need to be told. Amari Bennett lived a life that many overlooked. Every morning before most of the city stirred, he rose from his small apartment in a working-class neighborhood, laced up his worn shoes, and carried with him the pride of providing for his family. He was in his mid-40s, with a strong frame hardened from years of labor and eyes that held the quiet resilience of someone who had endured storms without complaint. His job as a janitor at Harrington Global wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. He swept the floors, polished the gleaming marble lobby, and emptied trash bins that executives never noticed. He moved through the building like part of its structure, seen but not acknowledged. Yet for Amari, the job meant something. It was stability. It was dignity. It was his way of making sure his teenage daughter, Maya, never went without food on the table or books for school. His world revolved around her laughter and her dreams of becoming a doctor. And in the middle of his ordinary life, working beneath the skyscraper's reflective glass, he carried himself with quiet pride. The building itself was a monument to wealth and power. Floors upon floors of executives in suits, glass-walled offices overlooking the city, and a constant hum of deals worth millions. Amari never envied them. He only wanted respect. Yet within that structure there was a divide as visible as the daylight outside. To some, Amari was not a man with a story, or a father with love in his heart. To them, he was just the janitor, disposable, invisible. That divide sharpened one afternoon when Amari's routine crossed with the arrogance of power. In the broad light of day, with co-workers and visitors bustling in and out of the lobby, he found himself standing at the center of something he never imagined. It began when the CEO himself, Richard Harrington, descended the lobby stairs with his entourage. Harrington was a man who carried himself like he owned not just the building but the people inside it. Tall, silver-haired, dressed in a tailored suit that cost more than Amari made in a month, he radiated authority. Conversations stopped when he walked past. Eyes turned, and yet beneath his polished smile there was a coldness, a superiority that seemed to thrive on reminding others of their place. On that day, Harrington's gaze landed on Amari, who was quietly mopping the marble floor, careful not to disturb the steady stream of employees walking by. For reasons that only arrogance understands, Harrington decided to make Amari an example. The CEO's voice cut across the lobby, sharp and mocking, as he accused Amari of leaving streaks on the marble. He demanded that the floor be cleaned properly, but he didn't stop there. In broad daylight, with dozens of employees watching, he ordered Amari to drop down and crawl across the floor like a dog, dragging the mop with him. Laughter broke out from some in the crowd. Others looked away, uncomfortable but silent. The midday sun spilled through the massive glass doors, illuminating the scene in cruel detail. Amari stood frozen for a moment, the mop in his hands heavy, his dignity caught between resistance and survival. The humiliation was sharp, cutting through him as whispers circled. And yet, under that ruthless daylight, he did what so many in his position are forced to do. He bent, he bore the weight, he endured. But humiliation has a way of seeding something powerful, resolve. The rising tension grew in the days that followed. Word of the incident spread through the building, whispered in corners, and passed along in hushed tones. Videos secretly recorded on phones began circulating. People outside the company started talking. What was meant to degrade one man began to expose something much larger, the rot that had always been there but hidden beneath polished surfaces. Amari's humiliation in the daylight became the spark that others carried forward. Investigations were whispered about. Lawyers began making calls. And Amari, though still shaken, found himself approached by those who had once been silent, now offering quiet words of support, or, more importantly, testimony. The empire Harrington had built stood tall in the skyline, but cracks were forming at its foundation. The climax came when the truth finally surfaced in a courtroom. In the brightness of a packed chamber, under the gaze of the law and the public, Amari's story was laid bare. The humiliation he endured, the videos that showed the cruelty, the testimonies of those who had witnessed, all of it collided in a wave of undeniable evidence. Harrington sat at the defense table, his once commanding presence now shrunken beneath the weight of exposure. The daylight that once gave him confidence now illuminated his downfall. Amari, sitting in a simple suit, head held high, was no longer invisible. He was the center. He was the truth. And when the gavel came down, signaling the judgment that shattered Harrington's empire, it was not just victory for one man. It was the sound of a system being forced to reckon with its cruelty. In the resolution, Amari did not walk away unchanged. The humiliation scarred him, the whispers haunted him, and the memory of being forced to crawl in broad daylight would never leave. But he also carried something else, a vindication, a strength that came from enduring and standing tall. Harrington's $2 billion empire crumbled under lawsuits, investigations, and public outrage. The same daylight that once revealed Amari's humiliation now revealed his resilience. He returned to his modest life, still a father, still a man of dignity, but now a symbol of resistance. His story traveled beyond the courtroom, beyond the city, becoming part of a larger truth that racial injustice thrives not in shadows, but in plain sight. The question remains, how many more humiliations must be endured in the open before the world finally refuses to look away? If you believe stories like Amari's deserve to be told, share this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so we can keep shining light where darkness once claimed power.